Hey everyone, I'm Reena Agrawal, research economist at Veros. Welcome to the Riskwire Housing Pulse. Joining me today is Eric Fox, chief economist at Veros. We are thrilled to have Patrick Birdsong as our guest today. Patrick is a seasoned real estate broker from Austin, Texas. Welcome, Patrick. To start off, can you say a few words about yourself and about your experience in the real estate industry?
Yeah, first, thank you so much for having me. Seasoned is a great word. I grew up in the business. My father had a brokerage. And when I moved to Austin to go to UT, I was like, I have to stay here. And so when I was in college, I got my license and started working for a realtor here. And that's kind of taken off from there. 22 years in the business now.
Patrick, Austin's housing market grew rapidly during the pandemic years, but recently it has slowed down considerably. So, how would you describe the current state of the Austin housing market? Is it more a buyer's market, a seller's market, or do you think it has kind of become more balanced right now?
That's a great question. I think if you're looking at it from a very like I'm a buyer, I'm a seller right now, it definitely favors the buyers. There are very few of them. And if you're trying to define who is in that buyer pool, it's hard to, describe them, right? It's a lot of first-time home buyers, a lot of investors, but it's also some very savvy people who are trying to take advantage of the market, knowing that as we get out of this funk that we're in, we're going to see the market go up again. But if you take a bigger picture look, and this is what I try to give my clients a perspective of, especially the sellers, we basically are back in line with pricing from 2021, like right before the pandemic just went, through the roof, and we can kind of treat that like a blip, right? Like it shouldn't have happened. It didn't happen to basically now. And if we line our pricing up with what the housing would have been in 2021, and Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you bought it in 2010. So what does it matter if you could have sold it for, 30% more in 2022? This is the market we're in.
So, what are your predictions? What would you tell the buyer or the seller? Are we going to see prices increase a little bit over the next year, or do you think there'll be a little slowdown, or they're pretty much going to stay the same? Would you have any opinion on that?
I do. I think we will fall like nicely back in line with that 4 to 5% appreciation curve that we were on until 2020. We literally followed that curve and stayed kind of above it for the last 20 years as a market, besides the little blip we had and when the last time the market crashed. Otherwise, we got right back in line with it, a little bit ahead of inflation. And with that 5 to 6% appreciation per year, you're doubling in price every 10 years. So it's a great place to be on that curve, right?
Mhm.
We don't want to go up 10, 20, 30% in a year again. It's not sustainable and it's not realistic.
So, Patrick, we know that the market is not one size fits all at any given time, and some price points do well, some price points are not doing well, and that's just in a normal market. Do you see the same thing, even though the overall market is a buyer's market? Do you see areas where they're particularly hot in the Austin area?
We're at the first time home buyer level, yes, we're seeing that being hot. The caveat is it seems like most of my buyers at that first time home buyer price range. And in Austin, that's anywhere from 3 to 600,000. A lot of them are choosing new construction because the incentives are so strong. They're permanently buying down the interest rate. They're taking 50,000 off the price. They're giving all the appliances and all the upgrades. And how does a normal seller compete with that, right? And the only way is better location because the builder's a little further out. But for the most part, that's the hottest part of the market still, is that new first time home buyer. And then on the opposite end, we're seeing luxury just taking a beating. And we see a lot of these listings of like off market that are price upon request. And all that says to me is they're asking a price that's not in alignment with the market, and they know it,
Mm.
and they don't
Huh.
want to say it out loud. But yeah, the middle of the market's doing well, just not as well as it was. We like to say that buyers are not buying on emotion anymore, right?
Mm.
It is a business decision. It is a logic-based thing. And so it takes time for a buyer to make that decision. They want to look at it from every angle and every aspect, and sometimes overanalyze themselves out of a house. Had some buyers recently that did that. Every house but one that they've looked at in the last 3 weeks has gone under contract, while they were thinking, oh, they'd probably still be there if they wanted to go back to them.
Mm.
But we're seeing in this, market right now at this moment that the interest rates are starting to drive some of those buyers back into the market.
Hmm. So it seems like you're saying that as far as price ranges go, entry level is definitely a stronger market. And then it sounds like in terms of new construction, that sounds like that's fairly strong due to the incentives right now. So let me ask you about differences in types of properties. So we've heard a lot, say in Florida, especially high-rise condos in South Florida, where that market is very depressed due to insurance. And I've heard stories about some of the condo market in Texas also is a little bit depressed. And I was wondering, if you look at condo versus single family, are you seeing that in Austin at all?
Overall, not a huge difference. The real big difference is Austin's still somewhat new to the downtown high-rise condo market.
Mm.
I used to own one, and this has been 12 years. 12 years ago, there were 2,500 residents downtown. Now there's close to 40,000 units. And so what you're seeing is the newest of the new is still selling well. But as soon as that new one comes online, the ones that are 2 to 3 to 5 years older and plus are getting a little more stagnant. And you're seeing a lot of
Mm.
that inventory build up and especially knowing, there's one building that they finished 15 years ago. They're doing a major assessment to redo everything on the inside to make it more competitive, make it nicer, newer, fresher. And those prices have come down considerably, knowing you've got this big assessment. Will they come back up? I think they will, because they are doing a nice facelift on it.
Mm.
But we got saturated because they built so much in the last decade.
So I was wondering about Austin's economy. In the past few years, there was such a strong influx of these high-tech companies and finance companies, and there was this hiring boom happening, and a lot of people were moving into Austin. But now I'm reading that that in-movement, that in-migration to Austin has slowed down. In fact, people have started leaving Austin. So what are you seeing in terms of the economic situation in Austin, or are we just seeing still loads of people coming in, or has that slowed down completely?
I got kind of two answers to that. We did have our first ever negative net migration last year,
Okay.
where more people moved out of Austin and Travis County than moved in, which is the first time I think that's ever happened in the history of Austin.
Okay.
But if you dig past the headline, you will see that the majority of those people, 90% of them, moved to the 5 contiguous counties. So it's not that like they're leaving Austin. They're just, I think it's old Austinites who are getting priced out of the market, and they're moving and they're getting more home for a little further out. And then I saw a chart actually this morning showing job employment within the state of Texas compared to the United States. And all the major cities, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, and Austin, are above the United States curve on employment. And Austin is way above the rest of them. So we're not seeing a lot of people hiring, but we're still seeing people hiring on an upward curve. It's just not on the level that it was 2 and 3 years ago. So we at the beginning of the year, we got ranked number 1 for buyer pent-up demand.
Mm-hmm.
So I still think we're seeing those people come in. They're just choosing to rent and see what happens with the market. And I think as soon as those interest rates start to correct and the prices soften a little bit more, we will see those people jump into the market and the prices go back up again. So we're just kind of waiting, and it's going to be slower than anybody ever
Yeah.
wants, right? Like everybody's like, "Oh, a light switch is going to turn on," and I'm like, "That's not how it works."
So the recent decrease in mortgage rates, have you seen like a direct impact of that on demand, or people are still kind of waiting for mortgage rates to drop further? Do you think there's been like a direct correlation with the recent drop in rates?
Absolutely. And you can see it where it's like that stair step, right? It's applications are up, sales are starting to go up a little bit, and closings will start to happen more. And like we're trying to coach our clients, when there's fewer buyers in the market, that's when you should be in there trying to get the deal. What we're seeing though is a lot of these sellers are still priced a little too high. So it's going to take a while to take all that inventory, because we're at, I don't know, right around 6 months of housing inventory. And so it's going to take probably 6 to 18 months for those buyers to really dive into it. I just think we got to get past an election, right? Around the country. The last 7 out of 8 elections, the market went up right after. And I think we're kind of poised for that again. There's no, to me, leading indicators to say that it won't happen.
Okay. And a related question I have is, it's these insurance costs that have been going up all across the country, and especially Texas. We see a lot of severe weather, we see hurricanes, and there are fires. So insurance costs have gone up. Are people finding that difficult? Are people complaining about it? Are they concerned about these rising home insurance costs, or does that factor into their buying decision at all?
I think it absolutely does. I think that overall in Austin, I think we've seen it go, insurance rates go about 25%. And the biggest issue we have is roofs. We're having to get anything that's 10 to 15 years or older roof wise. More than likely, we're replacing it, whether it needs it or not in this market. And the big driving factor is sellers need to negotiate somewhere, and that's where they end up negotiating, is we'll put a new roof on if we can keep the deal together. And that brings that insurance rate down. And when we're working with our buyers, we're telling them you absolutely need to be getting quotes at the beginning of going under contract during that option period, which we have in Texas, and knowing what your numbers are there, because it will factor in big time. And that's the other thing we've seen is a lot of the lenders are not being really honest about that number. They're still like, when I see them like give their quotes, I'm like, hey, insurance is low. Every time I look at them, almost, it's like your insurance quote there is too low. They haven't, not that they're trying to be dishonest, but they're all competing for the business. And so they're leaving their numbers a little low. And I'm like, no, you got to raise that up. It's not going to be in line with the market. But right now, to your point, it's a lot of talk. I think a lot of people are just sucking it up. We haven't got to the point where it's like, no, we're not buying because of that.
Okay.
So if right now the market is favoring the buyers in the Austin area, and you made the comment a little bit ago that sometimes buyers maybe think the houses are going to be around just a little bit longer than they actually are. Is there any advice you would give to buyers in this kind of market?
A lot of the time, I like to just tell them, we have these outs within the contract, right? And if you really want to sit and think about it, let's just give them lower option money and get a longer time and see if they'll take it. That way you can have that time for that thought process, because you've said you like the home, but you just need a little more time. And to me, it's a tactic of getting them out of their own way, right? They a lot of times, if you can get them to write it off on paper, they're more likely to buy the home. And that way they can kind of get out of their own way and not overthink this and overanalyze it. Involve too many people in the decision who aren't local to our market, don't understand our market. We get that a lot with, kids buying their first home, kids being in their 30s and still asking parents for their advice. So yeah, usually I like to say is like, I think the best strategy so we don't miss a great opportunity, especially if I think it's a great opportunity, because I don't want them just to put something under contract to do that, is let's lock it up and let's just see. Like, if you wake up tomorrow and don't like it, let's get out of it. There's easy enough ways to get out, right?
And I guess for sellers looking at the other side of the coin in your market today, what strategies are you giving them for how do I make my house most attractive to a buyer?
The great question, and I experienced this personally myself. We flipped a few homes this year, and to be frank, our timing was not great, and so we ended up on the market at times that were like right now. We got 3 of them under contract, luckily. But when 5% of homes are selling per week and 95% of homes are sitting on the market, how do we get into that 5%? Do you want to be in that 5%, right? Like, do you want to be on the market to sell, or do you want to be on the market to sit? And we've turned down a lot of listings recently who don't hear it, and that's the question they ask is, how do we get into the 5%? I'm like, it's price. Like, we can change condition, we can work on marketing, but at the end of the day, price is going to drive that. And the reason you're hiring me is because I'll tell you what nobody else will. And trust me, I don't want to tell you this. Like, I don't want to tell you this is the price today. Like, it's not fun anymore being a realtor. But my listings sell. Like, there's a reason we price them to be at that tip of the spear, and not, having somebody like, well, maybe they'll send us a lower offer, right? Well, why don't they send a lower offer to those other 95% of those homes that are sitting on the market then too? They're not doing it. They want the house to look like a deal, right? And then they want a deal on top of that. So that's usually what I say, is, and I show them the stats, like literally 5% of homes sell per week. The rest sit. And they don't understand that, because we came from a market where 100% of homes sold, or 96 or 7%. If it went on the market, it sold, right? And that has flipped in a big way.
Well, very interesting insights and comments you have, Patrick, on the Austin market. We appreciate your time with us today, and we'd like to thank our listeners for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
All right, you take care. Thanks.